Let's talk some Eagles on this Saturday. This is Philadelphia Eagles Now. I'm Chase Senior. Hope all of you out there having a fantastic weekend. Coming up on today's show, an Eagles coaching tracker to take a look at some Eagles coaching candidates who Howie, Roseman, and Nick Sirianni are interviewing to fulfill some coaching vacancies on this coaching staff. Could the Birds make a big move at linebacker? Howie Roseman with some interesting things to say there. We'll also take a look at some coaches who the Eagles are moving on from and losing. First, let's really set the foundation with the Eagles offensive coordinator candidates. And by the way, there are 3 names who have interviewed for the position to take over for Brian Johnson as of right now. And I did a full breakdown on each of the candidates up to this point. Kliff Kingsbury, USC quarterbacks coach, former head coach for the Arizona Cardinals and Texas Tech. Jerrod Johnson, the Texans quarterback coach, who's been credited with the great play of C.J. Stroud this year. And then Kellen Moore, former Cowboys offensive coordinator, current Chargers offensive coordinator. Again, went into a deep dive on all of these candidates, what type of offense they would bring to Philadelphia. That video is up on the channel right now. But then, following the hiring of Vic Fangio, the Eagles obviously have their defensive coordinator. They've interviewed a couple of coaches to take over as the new linebackers coach as well. And 2 pretty intriguing names here, Mike Caldwell as well as Joe Barry. For Mike Caldwell, former Jaguars defensive coordinator under Doug Peterson, he was just let go a couple of weeks ago. And the theme with Caldwell as well as Barry, something that this Eagles team needs so much, and that specialty in coaching up the linebacker position. It was a vacant hole on this Eagles defense this year, and other teams understood that, other teams recognized that, and they constantly attacked the middle of the field. Zach Cunningham played pretty solid this year, but there was a reason why he was still available up until the lead up to the regular season. Older player, injured a lot, and he's just okay. Nicholas Morrow in coverage was awful. Nakobe Dean got injured. You brought in Shaq Leonard. He's clearly washed to the point where he might decide to retire. I think it's time for Howie Roseman and this Eagles organization to invest in the linebacker position. I'm talking free agency as well as in the NFL draft. You look at some of the teams that are left here in the NFL playoffs. The 49ers have Fred Warner. He's an all-pro. He is a game changer and a game wrecker at the linebacker position. You look at the Baltimore Ravens. They have Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen. They are forces at the linebacker position. Last week and against the Eagles, we saw how Lavonte David and Devin White were able to impact the game. And as offenses spread out and they attack all areas of the field, and as teams put more of an emphasis on having 3 legitimate wide receivers, running backs who can catch out of the backfield and line up in the slot, as well as having good tight ends, you have to combat that with better linebacking play. And we're going to get into that more coming up here in just a little while. But for Mike Caldwell, former Jags defensive coordinator, specialty with linebackers, he was the linebackers coach for the Buccaneers when they won the Super Bowl back in 2020. He coached up Devin White and Lavonte David to be all pros. He also has familiarity with the Eagles organization. He played with the Eagles from 1998 to 2001 under the legendary defensive coordinator and defensive mind in Jim Johnson, who came to the Eagles in 1999. So Mike Caldwell spent a couple of years under the tutelage and the watchful eye of Jim Johnson. And then he came back to the Eagles after his playing career was over, and he was with the Birds 2008 to 2009 under Andy Reid as the defensive quality control coach, and then the assistant linebackers coach in 2010, and then the linebackers coach with the Eagles in 2011, 2012 during the tail end of that Andy Reid era. The Eagles did bring him in to interview for defensive coordinator. I wouldn't have liked that move. There was a reason that he got fired by Doug Peterson and the Jacksonville Jaguars, but He is now interviewed for a second time with Philadelphia, now as the linebackers coach, and I would really like that move. The same can be said for Joe Barry, although I might side with Mike Caldwell slightly if you were to pick between the two to be the linebackers coach. Joe Barry's resume, it's long, it's vast. Got his coaching career start in 1995, USC graduate assistant and defensive line coach. Then he went to Northern Arizona, linebackers coach and defensive ends coach. He coached linebackers at UNLV, defensive quality control coach with the San Francisco 49ers, coached the Tampa Bay Buccaneers linebackers from 2001 to 2006, became the Lions defensive coordinator 07-08. Then he goes back to the Bucs, linebackers coach in 2009, coached linebackers at USC from 2010 to 2011, San Diego Chargers linebackers coach. He overlapped with Nick Sirianni in San Diego from 2013 to 2014. Commanders, Redskins at the time, defensive coordinator in 2015-2016, Rams assistant head coach and linebackers coach from 2017 to 2020. Then he was the Green Bay Packers defensive coordinator over the last 3 years under Matt LaFleur, 2021 to 2023. That Packers defense wasn't good. A lot of people wanted him fired midway through the year. The Packers ended up firing him after the year, but that defense did make some strides with a lot of really young players on that roster, and that Packers defense went into AT&T Stadium, and they put the stranglehold on the Dallas Cowboys, pulled off the upset, and they had a terrific defensive performance, had a couple of interceptions of Dak Prescott. They did a really good job of mixing up their looks where Prescott looked to go to his first read, but rarely was it there, so he had to go through his progressions, scan the field, and by the time that he did that, Packers were able to get some pressure on Dak, and he made some awful decisions in that football game. So I'm not sure if Barry would be a good candidate for a defensive coordinator, but the Eagles aren't interviewing him to be a defensive coordinator. They're bringing him in to interview for the linebackers coach gig. Also has an interview with the Bears for the same position. Now, under Vic Fangio, he has had a lot of edge rushers and linebackers have massive seasons, and he's really developed those positions very, very well. So with the hiring of Vic Fangio and with the holes at linebacker on this Eagles roster, could the Birds make a big move at linebacker? I think it's time to do it. Patrick Queen is a free agent, never missed a game so far in his NFL career. He's still in his mid-20s. I would sign him, and I would draft Jeremiah Trotter Jr. And those are the inside linebackers in this new 3-4 hybrid scheme under Vic Fangio. And then you use Hassan Reddick and Nolan Smith as pure edge rushers who can get after the quarterback. And I think the Eagles could get back on track defensively with a couple of other really good players on the defensive side of the ball and some good members of that defensive line. So with Vic Fangio coaching up good backers, I think he can elevate and develop some linebackers on this team. You bring in a well-respected linebackers coach, and a weakness can turn into a strength just like that. Now, Howie Roseman at the end of the season press conference alongside Nick Sirianni, and that press conference I think is getting unfairly ripped apart by fans. Sirianni's given up offensive control. They're bringing in new creative ideas. The OC is going to have his fingerprints all over that offense, and they're bringing in Vic Fangio as DC. That's what Eagles fans wanted, but somehow they're not happy with how Roseman and Sirianni conducted that press conference. They're making changes and adjustments, which is what this organization needed to do. But Roseman was asked about his philosophy in building the defense moving forward, and let me know where you think the Eagles are going to go from here. He said, quote, "I feel like we've had a long history of success here, building the team a certain way, and I think maybe there's some preconceived notions that were just at the linebacker position that we don't care who we play at linebacker. Again, our two Super Bowl teams over the last 6 years, the linebacker play was good from those guys. I think if anything, it's my belief in the players that we have, the young players that we have. I have a lot of belief, and I know Coach does as well, in Nakobe Dean, and I believe in the player. I believe in the person. We also lost two linebackers at that spot, two good players from the Super Bowl. He's talking about TJ Edwards and Kaiser White, by the way. And we had Nakobe waiting in the wings. We drafted him for that role. Obviously, it didn't work out perfectly for him this year. That doesn't change the belief that we have in the player. Then we felt like we'd have the ability to get an off-ball linebacker, a will linebacker who can run and hit. And honestly, when you watch the tape, Zach Cunningham had a good year. He really did. He had a mentality that we like for the position. And Zach Cunningham did have a good mentality at that position. He hit hard. I thought he ran pretty well, but was out for a couple of games because of injury, and he's been missing a lot of time in his NFL career with a lot of injuries. And you know that there's a ceiling over Zach Cunningham. You know who he is at this point. And while you might like Nakobe Dean, he barely played in year one, and then he was injured a lot in year two. He got flagged pre-draft with shoulder issues, and he's already a smaller player who I like. I've said that here on the show. I like his instincts at the linebacker position. He's very smart. He studied engineering at Georgia. He won national championships at Georgia, right? But you can't bank on him being your inside starting linebacker with the green dot because he hasn't proven it to you yet, and he's been injured a lot. So I would upgrade immediately at that position, and I would make him compete for the role. And having him as a backup on a cheap contract with 2 years left on his rookie deal, that's not bad either. So that's what I would do at linebacker. I'm curious to see what Philadelphia is going to do to address that position. More coaching news here on the Eagles front. Not only is Jalen Hurts going to have a new offensive coordinator, he's going to have a new quarterbacks coach. Alex Tanney, according to Jeremy Fowler, free to explore other coaching opportunities. Tanney has the other opportunities, and he's asked to look into them. So the Eagles in transition here on offense as they search for a new OC and a quarterbacks coach. I wouldn't like Frank Reich as OC. I would love Frank Reich as a quarterbacks coach, and that's the move that I would make there. As for Brian Johnson, well-respected around the league, and this is what we've talked about. Some people feel as though within the Eagles organization that he was unfairly fired and unfairly treated. He has OC interviews and has had them with the New Orleans Saints, the Cleveland Browns, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And then Sean Desai, Vic Fangio disciple, he's interviewing for defensive coordinator openings with Buffalo as well as with Atlanta. So that's all the coaching news on the Eagles front. Wanted to give you all that information, and it's certainly a transitional phase for Philadelphia. But look, this roster is talented. This roster is good. And this is a team that I think can get back on track if they make some of the necessary adjustments. They look like a tired and slow team coming off a deep run in the Super Bowl. Then they had to go through that gauntlet, and San Francisco really broke them, I think, mentally and physically. They never recovered after that game. But this is a well-run organization that since 2000 has made it to 7 NFC championship games. They've been to 3 Super Bowls. They've won the second most playoff games in the sport. And I'm not going to say that they're just a dysfunctional, poorly run organization because all of the evidence points against that being true. So hope all of you have a great rest of the weekend. Some more coverage to come right here on Eagles Now. We've had some great offseason content. If you've missed any of it, just go back and look at the channel history, and don't forget to subscribe so that you can stay in the know with all things birds every day, year-round. Thanks for rocking with us.